Hello everybody, I'm Tedros Kide. Today we'll try to see week 1 part of the video, and this video will be focused on power transmission mechanism inspection. If you remember last time or in the first video, we'll try to see the introductory part for drivetrain and powertrain system, and we'll try to see about power transmission mechanisms, which means the application area of specifically mechanical power transmission, the gear, chain, and belt methods, and what will be the advantage and the disadvantage for these methods. Also, we'll try to see, or we will try to we will try to correlate about mechanical, electrical, and hydraulic, also pneumatic power transmission mechanism. And today we will try to see focus on mechanical power transmission inspections. In this part, if you observe, most of the machineries, specifically the drivetrain system, uses too much amount of gears, belts, and chains to transmit power from one part to another. So, in today's lesson, what type of inspection must be as a general performed for gear-operated machineries, belt-operated machineries, and chain-operated machineries. So, in the first part, we will try to see about gear maintenance and inspection. In this part, different things are done, especially in gear maintenance and inspection part. We will try to see about how the gear tooth contact must be checked, what type of lubrication did the gear require, and how can we perform some preventive things for these lubrication systems, and how the gear backlash will be affect the system operation, and what type of measurement do we perform, how can we perform visual inspection on gear parts. Also, in gear lubrication system maintenance, specifically, we will try to see different parts. For example, gear requires obviously initial lubricating change period. Most vehicle owners, especially the experienced one, they did one thing. After they acquire new vehicle or after they buy a new vehicle, what they did first is they will try to change some gearbox oil, differential oil, and also the engine oil. We call this one initial lubricating change period. That means this one is really valuable to assure different factors. Because if you observe during manufacturing, there will be a probability of precision, but if you see during manufacturing and different operation of the gear, there will be too much friction between two gears, and this gear will create some chip, and this chip, if it stay for a long period of time, or if we are waiting for lubricant changing interval, it will affect the parts. So it's better initially, after you buy new vehicle, it's better to change the oil with a limited amount of kilometer. After you drive, for example, if you need to change with 5,000 kilometer, it's better to change with 1,000 something for initial. We call this one initial lubricant change period. So you are really assured you employ proper lubricant. When you say proper means, for example, if the vehicle is manufactured in very cold area, if you bring some hotter area, the oil grade must be changed. Also, the second factor will be you will be assured that proper amount and proper oil is filled. The second one, which performs on maintenance for gear mechanism, cleaning and flashing. After a long period of time, the system requires some flashing because when the oil is operated or stay for long in one container, it makes some sludge at the bottom part. So to remove that sludge, it's better to flush the system. This is mostly done in engine oil, but it's preferable for some machineries or some gear operated systems. For example, we use some motor flash. Before you replace the engine oil, we will add some the motor flash, and after we add the motor flash, we need to run the engine for limited minutes, and after that we will drain the fluid, so it will make clean all the internal part of the engine. The third one is subsequent lubricant change interval. It then accordingly weighs the manuals of the machine or the vehicle. For example, if the gearbox requires change at some amount of kilometer or year, you need to change that one, or months. Again, if the differential, we call this one subsequent or subsequent lubricant change interval. Let's see one by one each part. Tooth contact checking. When you say tooth contact checking means by this measurement you will assure in which position the gears are mating. For example, let's look this one. If we observe this gear, the mating gear or into mating gear, let's look with some pictures. Okay? If you observe simply some gears, gear 1 and gear 2, if they have some gear teeth, again if I make some gear teeth over here, now what happened here is, look, if when they both gears are mating, we need to assure what that in which part the gears are connected. Sometimes they will connect around here only in this part, sometimes at the tip, sometimes they are really very closer to the root of this gear teeth. So which means when you say contact pattern, let's back to our PPT. If you look this gear, the contact area is mostly at the center, but at lower surface area. Okay, it's okay. Also, if you observe this one a little bit wider contact area, so there will be distribution of enough load. Again, it's okay. If you observe the third part also, somehow it's good. It's a little bit bottom, but still it surrounds the whole part of the gear or the center part of the gear. But if you observe this part, most of the pressure is going to at the rear. We call this one heel contact. This is, I'm giving you some differential gear, this contact. And if you observe this one, the gears are contact at the front side, and we call this one toe contact, like our leg, heel and toe. And if you observe this one, most of the gear is contact at the top part of the teeth, which means the bottom part will not suffer for or will not contact with the mating gear. And if you observe this, is it seems the gear is going down too much, and we call this one flank. So this will be the face, this will be the flank, this will be the toe, and this will be the heel. So if the gear is not contact at the proper like this, it will affect the lifespan of the gear, because most of the frictional force, most of the pressure is pressed at the one limited direction at the tip side. And if it is mostly in flank or toe, it will prevent the rotation of two mating gears. So it's not advisable to have flank, face, toe, or heel. It must be at the proper or the drive contact. It must be at the drive contact or the proper contact. And the second one, the gear lubrication. Of course, gear requires lubrication for controlling friction in wear, to transfer heat, or to act as a cooling agent. To act as a cleaning agent, because it will have some additive for special functions, and it will transfer some contaminants. We call this one as a cleaning agent also. Again, generally, if you observe, the gears require different lubrication method according to or depends on the pitch line and the velocity or the rotational speed, which means according to the speed, we must select the types of lubricant we are using. For example, grease lubrication are really preferable for lower speed application because as we know this is high viscous, so mostly it's preferable for gears for lower speed applications. And splash lubrication or oil bath method is really applicable for medium up to high speed, mostly for the medium is preferable. And the third forced oil circulation method is applicable for medium to high speed, pressurized. Let's see one by one. If you observe this one, grease lubrication, if you apply some grease here, when this one rotates, of course, this is somehow semi-solid, so easily it cannot separate from the gears. So simply it can stay there and it creates better lubrication in between. But if you come for medium and high speed operated things, we must use this one somehow oil bath method. This oil bath or splash method, half of the gear immersed inside the oil, and when it's going through, it will take some lubricant throughout each gear teeth and it will lubricate to mating gears. Again, if you observe the forced circulation lubricant, mostly they are applicable for high speed. They need to have some pump. If you observe, simply I give you example of this is engine lubrication system. They use some pump. By this pump pressure and throughout the gallery, they will lubricate some gears and different parts of the engine. So this means these gears are operated at high speed, so they requires too much pressure fluid amount. To bring that too much pressure or too much speedy, it requires pump. The next one, maintenance we perform on gear system is gear backlash. This gear backlash is really necessary to achieve correct operation of gear for example, for various size of gear. For smaller and size of gear, we need to have some backlash. By the way, backlash is the clearance between two mating gears. If you observe this clearance, this is we call backlash. If it is too much or lower, it's really difficult. It will create some noise, excessive wear, and damage on gears. So it must be proper. It's not be too much or lower. To measure this backlash, you must use some dial indicator. To measure this one, you need to fix one gear and you must move up and down or wobble and juggle by your hand simply. And when it is broken, you observe the dial and you will simply record the highest result. So this backlash will consider two things. The first, the passage for the oil, and the second, it will also consider the expansion rate of this gear teeth. If it is expand due to heat, and if the clearance between this and this part is very narrower, it will stuck together. So it also considers the backlash. If the backlash is very narrow, it doesn't allow the entrance of oil and it really creates excessive wear. If the distance or the clearance of backlash is very high, simply what will happen is it will create some impact force. That impact force will lead us to damage the gear teeth. Again, the second one is we must perform some visual inspection on gears. One visual inspection performed on gear is sign of overheating. So when you say sign of overheating means when the gear is overheated, it shows some blue colors, which means it will change the property of these gears, and after that the gear will be easily fail due to pitting effect. The next one, We must checking for oil leaks if the system is specially enclosed or closed system. Gear must be visually inspected for like this. If you observe this picture, observing for damage, sign of crack, and sign of corrosion. And we must perform some remedial action according to our finding. The next one, belt inspection. For belts, we can inspect or we can perform some maintenance, like we can inspect visually, we can check the belt tension, or we can inspect the pulley. In the first part, we must inspect visually and the noise for the belt. If the belt have unusual vibration or noise while driving, while the drive runs, it's really critical problem. Most of the time, the noise is come from the slippage, and the vibration is come from again due to wrong tensioning, and some noise factor will be also come from the pulley's misalignment and the bearing inside the pulley. So we must look in that one. If the noise is not easily identified on some rotating part, we must use some magnifying tools of noise. There should be no oil, spills, clutters, or other hazardous material around belts, because as we know, belt is easily damaged part due to some clutters or some hazardous part. If there is some oil, there will be slippage. So if there is slippage, too much friction will be created, and that will create some fried spot. So that's why we need to check for cracks, fried spots, cuts, or unusual wear pattern on the belt, because mostly these belts show some indication before they are failed totally. They show some crack, they show some fried spots, and they show some unusual wear before they damage totally. And we must check the belt for excessive heat also. This excessive heat will be caused due to friction. The next one, check belt tension. As we know, we will check the belt tension by belt tension tester. So we must check and adjust the belt tension properly. In most cases, when you perform an inspection of belts, most of the guys are not checking pulley. But pulley must be inspected for unusual wear or of a sign of damage. Because if the pulley have wear, automatically if we change the new belt also, it will damage with short period of time. This one is factors that contributing for belt lifespan. If you want to have longer lifespan of the belt, you must consider these parts. First, defective drive component will be lower the lifespan of the belt in lower range manner. For example, the pulley, the brackets, the mounting, and the non-frictional idler. Damage guards will cause for shortening life of the belt. But the first is improper drive maintenance is really critical. No retentioning, no replacing worn shafts, no cleaning guides, no checking for weak bracket or drive component, no checking alignment will be the first factor which leads to shorten the life of the belt. Environmental factor also critical. That's why it needs cleaning of guards like dust, water, debris, heat, rust are the factors. The humidity, oil, improper belt or pulley installation. If there is some misalignment, if there is some incorrect tension, improper handling of belt will be critical. If there is some poor design, also factor, and improper belt storage or handling is another critical factor. So to elong your belt life, you must consider this one. Chain inspection and maintenance. Obviously, the chains are inspected and tested at three-phase: pre-startup check, startup test, and inspection. Frequent inspection is critical. When you come to the pre-startup check, before we start or run the chain, we must check the connecting plates, the clips, cutter pins, or are they installed correctly? We must check that one. The chain slack has been properly adjusted or not. Is there any adequate lubricant there? We must assure that. The chain does not touch any object like chain cases. If there is some friction in between like this, the case and the chain, it will easily damage due to friction. There are no objects in the chain around in all parts and it must be clean. The next one, startup test. This means before a startup or before full operation, simply by turning with low speed, we must check for some sounds, vibrations, the interaction of the chain into the sprocket, and the sprockets by itself. Sounds means if there is any strange noise, we must make sure that. If there is some strange noise, which means the case or some object will touch the chain. If there is some vibration, oh, it means there is some misalignment or there is some improper adjustment of slack. We must check also the chain and the sprocket interaction, whether they insert properly or not, or if there is any misalignment, we must check. Also, we must check the sprockets. If they are separately smooth from the chain, we must check that one. Inspection, which means maybe we will perform a different phase. We must inspect for cracks in the link plates like this, cracks in rollers, cracks in pins, cracks or wear damage on the surface of the link plate. We must assure, because if there is some contact with some object, they will damage the pins, the link plate or the rollers. So we must assure that there is not any damage or sign of wear on this part. If there is sign of wear, or initially that part will be fair. So before that happens, we must have some remedial actions on these parts. Let's have a summary for this part. If you see, obviously, as we know, the drivetrain makes proper produced by the engine usable to the drive wheels, and this power transmission mechanism are applicable on mechanical, electrical, and hydraulic operating system. Mechanical power transmission mechanism mostly uses shaft, gear, chain, and belt. And from this part, the mechanical power transmission mechanism requires frequent inspection and maintenance to increase lifespan. For example, the gear needs always visual inspections for wear, for tear, for sign of overheating, for sign of damage. So, and we must check the lubrication. Did we apply proper lubricant for this? Is that it have proper tooth contact? Is the backlash is appropriate with the specification? Also, you must perform some inspection on belts, visually inspection if they have some fried spot, if they have some crack or damage or sign of crack. Are they noisy in operation or inspection? Are they have some oil contamination? And we must check the belt tension by means of belt tension check. Also, we must inspect the pulley, the interaction of the pulley and the belt. You see, the misalignment of the pulley. Is the pulley is worn or not? We must check this factor. At the end, we must check the chain before we start, after we start, and in schedule manner, we must inspect each parts of the chain. So, this is what I have. Thank you for your attention. If you have any question, comment, as usual, you can use my contact address and email address. I'm ready to answer your question 24/7. Thank you. Have a nice time.